What's good, Hoof crew? What's going on? Welcome to the Hoof Podcast, live after the draft, post draft. Anthony, I know your mic's got to be on fire. You've been on so many
That's
shows,
right. That's right.
doing the
People
entire
are
draft itself, and then being on recap shows this week.
yes,
This is
yes,
actually, I just had a baby, so this is my first show in a few weeks,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So getting
Congrats
warmed
again
up.
on the newborn, adapting
Yes,
to
thank
dad
you.
life. It's the
Yeah,
best, but
yeah, it's
it's
been
an
great so
adventure.
far. So yeah, having fun with that and adjusting the new schedule and everything. So uh, really haven't had a lot of time to look at football, but luckily for me, I did a lot of work on Keon Coleman pre-draft,
That's right.
and yeah, excited to talk that through and kind of what our thoughts are. We really haven't had a chance to recap, so that's really what the show's going to be about tonight.
Yeah, yeah, and it was so much fun to be live again for the draft. I mean, obviously we love the draft and it's so much fun, and we do all the prep work with the guys and different positions, and being able to be live again with Built in Buffalo and the whole crew and everybody. I mean, it was just a blast. It was a marathon, the first two nights it was 6-hour shows both nights. So we
That's a lot.
and
That's a lot of
prep and all
football.
that. So yeah, I mean, it flew by and it was a lot of fun. And we had different guests on, from outside and inside Built in Buffalo. And, we really just had an absolute blast, and it was fun to be able to talk to everybody and have live reaction. And,
Right.
the night of, there were some negative reactions that I had to bring down a bit, even
Yes.
with you,
I'll
Eric.
give I'll give
Remember?
you my
So
perspective.
that's
Yes.
right. Right.
A
So,
lot of Bills fans, right?
so
And you should be upset. We'll get into that in a second. But I wanted
we
to ask you first, before the Bills pick, what's your favorite moment of the first round? Which pick surprised you? Kind of like what
That's a
pick did
really
you
good
like?
question. Yeah, I mean, my favorite moment or, like, favorite player who got
Well, I
picked?
mean, there's like, okay, Michael Penix going 8,
Yeah,
everyone the
that was
awe
wild.
factor, right? Like,
Yeah,
oh
I
wow,
mean,
no one expected that. I
that
mean,
was
I probably did 500 mock drafts. I never once picked Penix to the Falcons, right?
exactly, exactly, and I definitely said, I mean, nobody, well, one person did, I guess, but the 2 things I said on draft night on the live show was that the 2 main talking points in the national media from tonight are going to be Michael Penix going to the Falcons and the Buffalo Bills trading with Kansas City. So I
Yeah.
truly believed, even then, I said, this is not our storyline. This is going to be the national media storyline tomorrow morning. The headline is going to be Falcons pick who and Bills do what? So yeah, I mean, that was, I think, ultimately, again, we've talked on the show for months now, for weeks, every week in, week out. Trading back was the scenario that we agreed was probably best for the team. And that's ultimately what they
Sure.
did. So I was happy with it. But then, the trade with Kansas City is really what caused the stir. And
Yeah.
yeah, that pick of Penix still is mind blowing. I mean, what are you doing? I don't get what your plan is to pick somebody that high when you could have
Yeah.
added
Well, it's
literally the best
interesting. If you
defensive
if you
player in the
like the
game.
guy, you take him, right? There's
And
no
I
guarantees he'll be in the top
Yeah,
8
it's really funny
again.
because just
Um,
before that pick, again, on the live show, I had said that I liked Penix better than JJ McCarthy just watching them play the game, just watching the games
yeah.
and the film or
And I
whatever.
think
Like,
there's been reports, Daniel Jeremiah saying there's a lot of teams that had Penix higher.
hmm,
One team even had him second, I heard.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so it's interesting. They're always so different. And if you like the guy, you take him. But I mean, look, Kirk Cousins not really yet that young. Um, he does have a little bit of a history, with the injuries and stuff. So I mean, you got to let it play out, and that's kind of why it's weird. There's no plan. It has to play out, and I think that's what's freaking everybody out. But I think you know
Mhm.
at some point, I think Kirk Cousins is going to show, okay, I'm an older quarterback now, and it's not like he was the most physically gifted guy, to begin
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
what's he, a top 15 quarterback? I
Well,
don't think you could say he's a top 10.
I
You know,
can, but you gave him $100 million. I mean, he's guaranteed 100. They gave him
right?
180,
Well,
but
that's
he's
I
guaranteed
mean,
100 million. Like that.
there's teams out there paying quarterbacks 85 million
That's
not to
true to
play.
leave.
So
That's very true.
it's
But I
you
mean,
know,
that's today's NFL, but still, I think Kirk Cousins is still a top 10 quarterback in this league. Absolutely. Especially when he has weapons. Would he be a top 10 quarterback if he was on Carolina? Probably not. But is he a top 10 quarterback on this Falcons team that has pieces at running back, wide receiver, all along the team? Yes, I think so. And I think he will be. But it's borderline. He's in that 7 to 12 range. I wouldn't. There's no way anybody could put him above 7. I think, but there's no way
Okay, he's
anybody could
35.
put him below 12
His
either.
birthday, 36 birthdays in August. So
Mm-hmm.
then are we talking? Okay, 2 years from now he'll be 38.
Right.
Right. So I mean, is Kirk Cousins going to be a productive quarterback until he's 40? I just
Well,
don't. I
what are
don't.
they going to do with him? Cut him and then pay him 40 million and then let Penix
Yeah.
take over? Maybe. Yeah, sure. But
Yeah.
that's
Probably.
still, you're still talking 3 years down the line. It is always better to let a quarterback sit and learn and behind a veteran, right? So
Yeah.
maybe
It's.
that was just their plan.
I mean, there's
And
not a
they
lot of samples out there. I mean, okay, Mahomes sat 1 year. The Packers are obviously, they're the well-known team that sits their quarterbacks for a number of years, and that
Yeah,
works out for them.
yeah,
But just because we have one team that does it, it's interesting to see, like, will that work on other teams? Or
yeah.
are the Packers just lucky? I mean, there's no way to know that, right? It's like it's interesting. And the Falcons aren't really taking the approach of, um, you know, we have an established guy and we're getting sour on him, right? Because that's kind of what Green Bay, like when Rodgers took over for Favre, everyone's getting a little sour on Favre, right?
Uh-huh,
You knew he was
uh-huh.
going to retire at some point, and then he did retire, and then he came back, then he did retire, and then he came back. So it's like it got a little old. So then it was ready. It was time for Rodgers to start, right? And you knew that day was coming. Same thing with Jordan Love. Like it really surprised people when Jordan Love was picked, but Rodgers and the media is a little bit negative. Haven't really made the playoffs every year, but haven't got past the championship game. I mean, I think they were ready. This one's interesting because you bring in the free agent and then you draft a guy, right? It's not quite the same. Everyone, I think in
Right.
Atlanta, everyone's excited about Kirk Cousins, right?
So again, yeah, that to me is the bigger problem. Maybe you can argue that the quarterback of the future thing is a real thing that teams should do and whatever. The real problem is you had your pick of the litter of defensive player to add, and you need some. And you went instead to the quarterback of 3 years from now. So it sounds like you're setting up your team for 3 years from now instead of focusing on the here and now, which is more where Atlanta should be given the pieces that are on this team now, right? They're not planning for 3 years. They're
Yeah.
ready to win now. In 3 years, they're going to have to deal with rookie contracts that are coming up and all that,
Mhm.
right? So it's not going to be, they have that time. They have this 3 years to actually capitalize. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I didn't like it
Well,
more
their
than,
picks in the draft after Penix were all defensive line,
yeah,
right?
but that's the problem.
3 defensive linemen: Braylon Trice, Dorless out of Oregon, Arohoho out of Clemson. I mean,
Mhm.
those were those are good
Decent. Yeah.
picks,
Yeah.
good late picks that maybe could turn into something. But so I think they did address the defensive line as well. And I think with the Falcons, they just didn't have a lot of needs really going into the draft, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, decent
cornerback, but they already have
cornerback.
a
Yeah.
great cornerback in AJ Terrell. And defensive line we knew was a need, but outside of that, it's like I think they're pretty stacked. So I don't hate it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you
I
got
mean,
you got to ride or die with the quarterback you pick in any draft, and I think if you think he's the guy and you want to ride and die with him, that's fine. I have no problem with that at all.
mm, yeah. We'll see how it works out. Again, nobody knows until years from now. But Jordan Love and that experiment seems to have paid off for Green Bay. So maybe this one will long term for Atlanta. Short term, it is questionable. There's no doubt about that. But long term, it could pay off.
Any other picks you want to touch on? I mean, Quinyon Mitchell to the Eagles, I thought was
Yeah, the
they were
number
probably
one,
shocked that he
I
was there
talked
for
about
them.
them. I talked about them last night. Honestly, the Eagles were probably my number one in terms of quality of what they got in this draft and like overall grade or whatever you want to call it, ranking. I really love the Eagles draft. Just overall, the 2 cornerbacks they got, the tackling, they end up with Cooper DeJean. It was
They always draft
phenomenal,
well.
phenomenal draft for them, and they're already a good team. So they were already a great team, and now their number one weakness, which we saw personally when we watched the Bills game, was tackling. They could not tackle at all, right? It was embarrassing at times. And they went and grabbed who I thought was the number one cornerback and Cooper DeJean on top of it, the cornerback / safety, who is a tackling machine. So they really took some guys, at the top that can move the needle for this team that was already at the top of the NFC. So
Yeah.
love what it did for them. And the rest of their draft was pretty nice too. So yeah, I feel like they They did very, very well. So that was the other one that I was thinking about, and I did bring them up on the show last night.
Yeah, and I think it's there's a chance that Quinyon Mitchell's in the running for defensive rookie of the year. I mean, you look at what Devin Witherspoon did for Seattle last year. A lot of similarities, right? It's not like the Eagles' defense is absolutely stacked. So like that just makes life or adjusting to the NFL for Quinyon Mitchell that much smoother. I think it's going to be a big pick for them. I think he's going to have a big impact on their team.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that's the idea, right? Especially again for a team that was already good, that is a really big move. The counter to that is Xavier Legette, right? A guy who I thought the Bills were going to pick. That was my predicted pick, and they pass him up, and he goes to Carolina, and now it's like, okay, is he going to be able to shine as much in Carolina as he would have in Buffalo?
Well, that's what
Buffalo. That's makes it questionable.
So
Sure.
okay, talking about draft night for me with the Bills, it felt like this draft. Okay, a couple things, right? We're turning over the receiver room. We knew receivers number one, right? You have a quarterback in their prime, right? Took the Bills a long time to get a quarterback in his prime, right? A good franchise quarterback. You also have the offensive line, which is solid. Had their best year last year, with Josh Allen, right? So you don't really have a lot of need there. So like you can go all in on receiver, has to be the pick, right? What frustrated me on draft night was, you have your pick of the litter, that second tier group of receivers, right? Whatever one you want is there for you, right? And I feel like because you get rid of Diggs, because Gabe Davis is gone, I felt like they should have just went for it and took the guy. It was frustrating for me in the moment, right? The dust always settles, right? You only get about 10% of the information if you're not in the Bills room, right? With Brandon Beane himself, right? Or the scouts. So I'm not trying to say he should have did this or that. It's just my thoughts and my reaction as a fan. You let Kansas City pick from the litter first, right? Then you kind of take risk and say, well, these other teams like Baltimore, San Francisco, who actually took a receiver, they're going to get the second pick of the second group of receivers, right? And then you're going to give one away to Carolina. So we'll take the fourth best, which they might have had Keon Coleman number one.
Right.
But you risk that somebody could have took him and you wanted him, or you thought he was the best fit. That's kind of where it was frustrating for me, right? Because you look at, what Zay Flowers did for Lamar Jackson. You're looking at Kansas City rebuilding their receiver room. I know Rashee Rice is going to, sounds like he's going to be suspended for half the season, but it's still Marquise Brown, Travis Kelce resigns. I mean, it just seems like they're not going to be as bad as last year. And you're like, well, what are we going to do? What are we doing to counter that? And it felt like that first night they were doing nothing. Right.
Well, they did do nothing that first night. They traded down twice. They got
like you're letting other teams.
You got Carter as a third round pick from Kansas City. Thank you very much. Right.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out.
That's a good pick, right?
Yeah, good value pick. Yeah.
And you get an extra fifth round pick from Carolina to move down one spot, right? And again, to your argument of, well, they only ended up with the fourth or fifth best of the second tier of wide receivers in this class. They knew who their guy was, and they knew who other people were interested in, right? He wouldn't have done it if he didn't think Kansas City was taking Worthy and that he didn't want Worthy, right? Great, you take
Fair.
Worthy.
And
we
the
don't
argument
want
is, Kansas City would have got Worthy either way, so I'm not really
exactly
so mad about that. But I would just thought the whole draft process, be aggressive, get the guy you think makes the Bills better, and I thought they kind of took a lot of risk there. I think it worked out. I think Coleman was still their top guy. But still, it felt like they were taking unnecessary risks to me.
What I also said in the shows I've been on since the draft, there's been too many of them. Brian Thomas Jr. was my number one target who I wanted the Bills to get. And I said, only if he falls within 5 picks of the Bills, right? Sure enough, he falls on draft night. And what I said was the other remarkable thing that we didn't talk about, but was really fun to watch live on draft night and react to live on draft night, was 14 straight offensive players come off the board, right? And the problem with that is we just talked about the Eagles and how good they did. When Brandon Beane was able to say, okay, my guy, Brian Thomas Jr. has fallen and he's right here for me to take, I'll call up my friends and trade up and give them what they want. Well, there was 2 problems, really. the cost of moving up that much, as we saw last year, is a 3rd round pick, which we didn't have. So you could have said, well, now we got to get creative with one of the 2s next year. We'll give you that 2, you give us your 3 and, a 5 or something, right? So Bean would have tried to make that work, the value of the pick. But the second problem is you call up your friend at the Eagles and you're like, hey, Eagles, trade me this pick so I can take Brian Thomas Jr. and I'll give you the value for it. And the Eagles said, wait a minute now, our number 1 cornerback on the board is here. There's no way we're trading out of this spot. We're not trading anything for this spot, right? We want that guy. He's our number 1 corner on the board, our number 1 position in need. So they took him, right? And I think that is where, the Bryant, because the very next pick was Jacksonville, who had already traded down, took Brian Thomas Jr. So I think that is what ended up happening. I truly believe Bean wanted to try and get Brian Thomas Jr., but was realistic about we can only get him at this spot or lower, right? And he ended up going right where they weren't able to make a trade, because you always have to have a trade partner.
Right.
And I think because of that move, we were lucky to then be able to move back twice and get some other things for it. Because they must have known they wanted Coleman and that nobody else was probably taking him.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, because it's like, we thought maybe they would go for speed, right? Stretch the field, get somebody who can really, just win with straight line speed. And it just seems like they weren't really looking for that. They, obviously pass on Xavier Worthy. Obviously, Troy Franklin fell to the 3rd or 4th round, which is surprising to everybody. I thought he'd be higher. I guess, obviously I'm not a scout or anything, but when you watch him, he seems like a good player. But I guess maybe the release package, and then you look at other players like Jalen Hyatt, it just doesn't transition as well with the smaller frame. That probably scared a lot of people away. So like you start weeding these out. Okay, we thought maybe Xavier Legette was the guy that the Bills liked, but obviously they didn't want him. Yeah, clearly.
Yeah,
like, it wasn't like, oh, we'll just let Carolina pick and we'll take the other guy. No, they knew it was Legette, and
everybody knew that
we don't want him.
Yeah, I think the other part. So again, I'll tell you what I've been saying all week since the draft was that clearly the Bills didn't want Legette. It's a matter of why now, right? Why did they not want Legette? Why did they like Coleman more? You have to look at the experience, right? He only did it in this one last year in the games, that maybe were against inferior opponents versus what Coleman had on his record. And you don't even have to compare it directly to Coleman, but just we've only seen him do it this short a time period versus this level of competition and his overall age, right? He is experienced. He is 24, I think. So older end of being drafted. And that ultimately was my take on why they probably passed on Legette. But do you have thoughts on that? Because I discussed that on a couple of different shows leading up to now. So
on why they passed, I think he had one good year, right, of production, and it was his senior year. I think he actually played 5 years, right, because of the COVID year. So there's question marks around that, obviously. And then I think when he played good teams, SEC teams, he didn't have good games, right? So that's also concerning. But again, I think you could see the talent there. And it really, I think what Brandon Beane mentioned in his press conference is you talk to the coaches, like, what can you do with this mold, basically? And I think they just said, look, we like this guy better. With the Keon Coleman mold, he's 20 years old. He's 6'4". He could probably grow another inch, right? He's got a great release package. He's extremely physical. He is a good route runner, but I mean, there's questions with separation, but I'm not really sure if they asked him to do that. I think he can improve that. Because in the NFL, it's timing, right? There's a lot of separation in college, and it's really important, right? But in the NFL, it's timing. You can get guys open with timing and routes, and the Bills will do that. So I think when you're looking at the mold and who the coaches want to work with, that's what it comes down to. And I think Keon Coleman just wins that argument, right?
Yes,
especially because the Florida State, they relied on him.
Yes,
right. He's their go-to guy, and he answered the call, right? You go watch the Duke game. They're throwing a triple coverage to him because they believe in him, right? They know he can handle that type of role. So I think there's something to be said there as well.
Yeah, and my other favorite thing in the past week that I've learned, right, and taken in consumed content wise, was on Lockdown Bills with Joe Marino. He had a guest on, and I can't remember the guest's name. I should have looked it up going into this show, but I didn't. The most important thing I learned was they crunched the numbers. Bean, I said at draft night, Bean is playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. The number one trait, he went through and analyzed this guest who was on the show, Joe Marino's show, analyzed, okay, let's look at the wide receivers chosen and their overall breakdowns and their characteristics and what they do well, speed, size, all these things. And the number one characteristic in successful wide receivers over like the last, I don't even remember how many, 15 years or something, throughout every round, the number one characteristic of success was body control. It seems like, you can teach them to route run. You can't teach speed, but speed alone didn't do it, right? We've seen enough of those guys fall and not succeed. But the fact that body control was the number one thing that tells you if a guy is going to be successful in the NFL. And without a doubt, Keon Coleman was the body control receiver in this draft, right? That was his.
So how do you measure body control? What are you talking about here? We're talking about like
on
dropping
the field.
His weight.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Just movement in his
being
hands
nimble with his feet.
Yes, right. And you see this in his play tape, right? At least I did.
Yeah.
When you watch Coleman tape, there's no question the way he can get to the ball. It's like he could not be looking; it could be above his head, and boom, he's going to be able to turn and catch it, right? Because his instincts kick in, and he's able to manipulate his body, not just his hands, right? You got to get your hands to the ball, but when a guy is covering you, and the contested catch thing is kind of in play here. When you're covered by a guy, but the quarterback can put the ball in a certain spot and you can contort your body and move it, control it to be able to juke out of the way.
Not stiff for a big guy, right?
And it translates from his hands down to his feet, right? Because you got to not only complete the catch and get your feet in bounds, but he translates it to a movement, the next movement. And again, it's all one fluid thing. Catch the ball this way, feet going that way. His feet are already thinking about the next step when his hands are catching the ball, and it doesn't matter where that placement is, he can go get it. And that is, what I really stood out to me watching his tape,
right?
Even before this, right? Because I always said, like, I think Keon Coleman's going to be a great receiver, but I think I want it to be for somebody else because I'm worried about this risk factor that people who know what they're talking about.
Well, a lot of people thought the Bills were going to go a different direction with the philosophy of the
Mm-hmm.
offense because you look at what they have. It's like, okay, Kincaid's a nifty route runner. You can get him the ball. We have, Shakir in the slot. You really are just missing the top end speed guy, which would open up those underneath throws. So then you could, you keep the safeties deep and then work the underneath. It just makes sense. But I think they ultimately they're going to go a different direction. They want big physical receivers across the board.
Yeah.
Just think about it. You're going to have Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid. Those are big guys, right?
Yeah.
And now Keon Coleman there, another big guy. I mean, the offensive line's big, right? The tackles are big guys. I mean,
and don't write off Curtis Samuel as a speed guy, right? I mean, he does everything on the field. This is the most underrated signing for the Bills this offseason by far. Everybody's talking about how bad the wide receiver room is, but you're talking about a guy who's never had a good quarterback now coming to play with Josh Allen. Josh Allen makes everybody phenomenally better.
Yeah,
but
and he's still fast, too, right?
He can get open anywhere on the field. He can line up anywhere on the line and be successful.
Well, it feels like he's been in the league a long time, and he has, but he got drafted at 20 years old.
He's young.
Well.
Yeah,
so
he's young.
He's been in the league, I think, 8 years, but he's only 28.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting. And, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see. And especially to think about like run blocking. I mean, James Cook showed a lot last year. We know Josh likes to run the ball. I think a guy with Keon Coleman with two tight ends, you're going to really have the advantage in most plays in run blocking. It feels like, right. Keon Coleman's a great run blocker.
Strength. Yeah.
Because he's just bigger, right? And he's extremely physical. And again, I think he's only going to get better at that stuff. He'll beef up. He's going to grow more. But I do think we have to be a little patient. I don't think he's going to come out. He's got a lot to work on. It's almost like he's a little raw, right? And you know how long it took Josh 2 full years to kind of reach his potential, right? Or start to sniff that potential. I'm not sure if Keon Coleman, because obviously receiver, I don't think it's as difficult as quarterback. But it's going to be a long process to get him. He's going to get better every year, I think, for the next 3-4 seasons, right? But he has a high ceiling. And I think that's another thing you look at. And I think that's another thing the Bills coaches and Brandon Beane, the scouting department, fell in love with Keon Coleman. I mean, Brandon Beane said it himself. If he ran a 4.4, he's not on the board for the Bills. Right. So you're just missing that one thing. So you can work with a lot of other things that Keon Coleman brings to the offense.
Yeah. And we do have to give Eric, I mean, I was talking about you the entire time from the draft night on, right? Because number one night, when after the draft night settled, obviously Eric and I are friends, so we're we're texting about it the next day, and he's all upset. The Bills didn't make the big splash I wanted. They didn't make the move, and I
It
kept
felt like this
yelling.
was the year, right? This is the pivotal year. We got to get Josh a weapon, right? Let's go.
But on that point, just briefly, next year is the big conclusion I had, right? Next year is that year. We have the perfect amount of capital next year to get anybody you want. And to me, the two positions right now that are going to stand out of need are right tackle and cornerback, right? You can go up and get the best cornerback in next year's draft. You can go up and get the best right tackle in next year's draft, wherever you want, or your favorite one, or whatever. Because now we have 2 2s, we still have our 1, we've got 2 4s. There's a lot of room to work with there.
Yeah.
To go up and get that guy.
Well, I'm not sure if you're going to have those picks post June 1st when Beane trades for a number 1 receiver out there.
These are the numbers.
Look,
There's no such thing as a number
every
1
press
receiver.
conference. He mentions it in every press conference, like, "Oh, we might not be done," or "We'll wait to see what we have available after June 1st." Right. So, I think he'll be looking around, and again, like a guy like Stephon Diggs just doesn't pop up as available.
Yeah. Well, that quality of guy isn't going to be there for sure.
Yeah.
But,
so
that's why I don't think they're going to do much.
Shot.
They might sign a free agent. That wouldn't surprise me. But I've been talking about DJ Chark since November. But
right.
That's not a guy. That's not a guy that.
But if an opportunity arises, you have picks, right? You have some picks that you can move.
Yeah. Right.
So you put the Bills in a good position, and like you said, if you just wait it out and nothing comes up, you have a good draft next year. So yeah, I get it.
Trying to give you your flowers here. That draft night, you were upset. We were texting. You're like, the Bills didn't do it. But I kept arguing. What was my number 1 argument? I'm like, you jerk. The Bills are going to end up taking your guy, Keon Coleman, the one you've been preaching about.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you guys, in all sincerity, for weeks, we would have this conversation, for months even. We've been having the conversation about wide receiver. Obviously, all of Bills Mafia has. And Eric's persistence was, why are we not talking more about Keon Coleman?
Yeah.
Why is Keon Coleman not the guy? Why do
Keon
I watch
Coleman
Keon
supporters?
Coleman
it got really lonely in the Keon Coleman support room.
It did.
It got very lonely in there.
But you were the guy saying, "What? Look, every time I watch this guy, I think the Bills should pick him."
Well, it's just the mold, right? I mean, and again, I think a lot of times people watch it and they say, "Well, he can't do this, he can't do that." Well, you got to kind of look at what could you coach him to do, and that's extremely hard, right? But I mean, a 6'4" guy who might become 6'5" in the next few years, who is extremely fast on the field, game speed, right? Maybe not the 40 time, but game speed. And he's going at these cornerbacks, right? It's just a really fun watch. You can see the route running ability. You can see the release package. I mean, there's a lot to work with there. And I think that's what's hard about scouting and why you need like years of experience to actually be good at it, right? Because you're almost guessing of what this person could be, right? And again, without knowing the personality, I mean, there's been plenty of talented receivers that don't make it.
Don't work out. Yeah.
And it comes down to like, do you want to be great? Do you want to put the work in and day out for the next 15 years to be great? And it's like, you could be the most talented guy and just not have that piece, and you end up mediocre in the NFL.
Yeah.
So it's always a crapshoot, no matter what.
Yeah, we won't know for 3 more years whether this draft really matters. At least 3 to 5 years, right, to figure out who in this draft really made it or not, right? So, but again, credit to you to being the guy saying Keon Coleman makes a lot of sense for this team, and here's why, all the time. And we'd constantly fight back and forth about, no, I think it should be this guy, or the Keon Coleman thing. And my response was always, people think that he could be a bust. And right now, the Bills don't have the luxury of taking a bust. And now I'm the more I've gotten to know him, the more I've watched, I'm more comfortable with the pick. It still wasn't my guy. I'm never going to be like, oh, I wanted the Bills pick. That wasn't my guy. But
it's a low floor, high ceiling pick.
Correct. Yes.
I think the worst he could turn out is mediocre, right? That's fine. mediocre receiver. It's not the worst thing ever. He'll get some production, maybe not a lot, but then like the ceiling is incredible. It could be one of the top guys, right? He has that kind of potential, whereas the other guys really don't. So it's fun. This draft year was really fun just because receivers really, when you're watching tape, it's probably the most fun position to watch outside of quarterback, obviously. But yeah, Spin corrected me. High floor, high ceiling. That's what I meant. Sorry, I'm sleep deprived.
No, I meant the other thing. High ceiling, low floor. That
Low
he
floor,
does
so he
have
could
the
be a
potential.
bust.
Correct. That's what I was worried about coming
No.
in.
I
Again,
think it's high floor.
Not by my own evaluation, but by what people who know what they're talking about have said about Keon Coleman. Again, they could be wrong. They've been wrong before, Josh Allen, right? They have always been wrong. By the way, guys, if it gives you any hope, Eric was also the one who was in on Josh Allen from the whole time. So if he was in on Josh Allen and that turned out to be a home run, Keon Coleman could be the next guy loaded into that gun of Eric had it first, right? So let's hope that that's the case, because if he's even, three-quarters of what his total potential is, that's going to be a great pick. It's going to be a great pick. The fact that they traded down and did that, it doesn't matter what the other guys do. If Keon Coleman is reaches 3/4 of his potential, as a wide receiver, I even said on one show this week, if he only ends up being a wide receiver 2, but a good one, a really good one, then that's a successful pick in my mind.
Right. Which gives him a high floor.
Yes, right.
Well, again, it's like there's so many comparisons too when you listen to national media or other podcasts with Keon Coleman.
I know,
literally, I've heard him compared to every
Brandon
big receiver that's ever played in the
Mike
league.
Evans.
Yeah.
I mean, weird ones.
Right. I like the Cortland Sutton comparison, but really, I thought it was like N'Keal Harry or Anquan Boldin. They're kind of the same person, but Anquan Boldin is just not afraid of contact whatsoever.
That's right. Yeah.
And that made him different, right?
Yes.
So really it comes down to personality and then what kind of work you want to put in. And then is the game too fast for you? I mean, there's the processing side of things. And none of us can figure that out outside looking in, right? You got to get in the room with the coaches. You got to talk to the Florida State coaches. So to me, the Bills being high on Keon Coleman and taking him tells me that they think that he can be coached up and be a dog, right?
Yeah.
Because I think they go Cooper to Gene if they don't think that.
Ooh,
honestly.
Yeah. That was my fear. Even on draft night, my gut was churning when we traded down. I'm like, oh no, they're going to take DeJean at 32 instead of taking the and obviously it wasn't the case. And they do end up going receiver, and DeJean ends up falling a few more picks before getting picked by Philly ultimately. But yeah, that was another name that was still on the board, and they said, nope, Coleman's our guy. So good on him for being the guy, and good on Bean for making the decision to still go wide receiver despite what defensive players were on the board.
Yeah. And just last thought on Coleman is it's really Josh Allen's perspective, because now at this point in his career, 7th season, he should be making stars out of receivers.
Yes. And
you know what I mean?
100%.
You look at all the greats, they just look at even Pat Mahomes last year. Like anybody who's on that roster is going to catch a football. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see Josh, take that next step as a leader. And kind of see, can he bring Keon Coleman along?
Yeah.
What's their chemistry going to be like? I mean, that's always going to be fun stuff.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing on the inside because I'm thinking, and on the outside, because all I can think is the national media narrative. The Stephon Diggs created Josh Allen for what he is, and he won't be anything without him. Now Keon Coleman has become. If Keon Coleman becomes a legit number 1 and like a top 10 receiver in this league, they're going to say, well, it's because of Keon Coleman that Josh Allen is still having success. He replaced Diggs with Coleman, who's now a number 1, and that's why he's having success. Right? The narrative never ends. But just like you said, it's going to be Josh Allen making this receiver who he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's Josh Allen bringing out the best in people. You could say the same with Curtis Samuel, because he's never had a caliber of quarterback of Josh Allen. We're going to see the best version of Curtis Samuel this season and next season because he's with Josh Allen.
Yeah, I think if you look at like Tom Brady, like, okay, he had Randy Moss 1 year, or like just, small part of his career, but really he made so many more stars. Deion Branch, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, Danny Amendola. I mean, it's just endless list of guys who are not the most talented, but because they had good chemistry with Tom Brady, became stars. And it's funny about those other guys too, is they all went to other teams. Deion Branch went to Seattle. I mean, Amendola played with Detroit, and they did nothing. Right? They were very, very quiet on the other team. So it really does come down to like, what's your relationship like? Are you seeing things the same way on the field? And you have to work together every day. I mean, so that's the stuff that we'll be paying attention to leading up to the season because we got nothing else to do. But it's gonna be fun to watch Keon Coleman grow, right?
Yeah.
That's probably what I'm most excited about as we get the inside look on that. Every single game you say, "What'd Keon do?" Well, he needs to work on this, or I saw improvement here. That's
Just
what it's
like we
gonna be
did
all
with
about.
Josh, right? We saw that
Exactly.
incremental, linear improvement from Josh. Josh did
Yeah.
nothing but got
Right.
better every
And
year for 5
wins and
years.
losses didn't really matter at that time. It's different now for sure. But back when
Yes.
they drafted Josh, I just want to see him get better every week. Right. I don't care what the scoreboard looks like. I mean, even his first start, I think they got blown out by 40, right, versus the Chargers. But he got better the next week and got better the next week. Then had a setback. Then, it's just that the development track's really fun to pay attention to for me.
Yeah,
What
it'll
else we got?
fun to watch because we finally, this is the first high wide receiver we've had in a long time, right? Since Sammy Watkins, basically. So I mean, trading for Diggs was one thing, and we knew he was going to be good, but now it's like this is our guy who we're going to see become a star now in our offense and in our way as a Bills organization. So that is exciting to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
And how about the guy's personality? We haven't talked about that, but
Okay.
that's one thing I was not aware of until he was drafted. I did not
Right.
watch press conferences of Keon Coleman. I guess I should have because the guy is a blast, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, I had my friends on Facebook and elsewhere reaching out to me who are not football fans, who do not even understand how football works, who don't know anything about the draft, and they're asking me like, "Oh, how about that Bills pick Keon Coleman? He seems like so much fun. Did you hear him talking about his jacket from Macy's and watch him running on the field?" And I reposted on Facebook the video of him first going on the field and being like, "Oh, I'm gonna run the other side, touchdown, touchdown," like every single one of us would do if we got to walk on the field, right? And he does that because he's just so genuine and like down to earth. It's refreshing to see that in a guy.
Yeah.
And he just, it didn't seem like he was flustered at all. He was comfortable. He's like, "This is who I am. My jacket's from Macy's. I'm running down the field like this is." He's living in the moment.
I think it was Shannon Sharp and Chad Johnson, or Chad Ojocinco. I forget their podcast name, but I was watching their podcast. They were talking about Keon Coleman, his press conference, his personality, and Ochocinco's like he's just like me. Like look, most people are nervous. It's your first press conference with the Bills, right? You're meeting everybody you're going to be working with. It's like your first day at a new job, right? And he wasn't nervous at all. He's just himself. So that shows you he's confident and he's comfortable, right?
Exactly. And when it came to the business too, don't get me wrong, his is not just the personality now either. His personality translates to his inner confidence, as you said, right? He can talk to McDermott and say, "This is what I think I do well, and this is how I need to learn, and this is what is going to work well with Josh Allen." He knows the ins and outs of the football too.
Yeah. I agree with Roy here. Like I would not, if it was filmed, I'm not running it. But if it wasn't filmed, I might try it.
100. I mean, I would run. Come on. I would do the opposite. I would cut the film.
At the 50.
Yeah, I know. I would cut the film before I pass out in the end zone because then that would be, I'd get all the way there and then just fall on my face. Like, shouldn't have done that. Where's the cart? Where's the medical cart? Yeah, because but it was such a fun video. Just a genuinely like down to earth dude who's reacting the same way any of us would, in that situation. So really, really fun to watch. And I can't wait to see his personality translate to game day and the sideline and interaction with his teammates because, again, he just seems like he's not one to get very flustered. I'm sure he gets frustrated, when things don't go well, and we'll see him in those moments too. But it does remind me of a lot of the personality of like a Trey White, for example, somebody who's still hyper competitive, still wants to win, but the guy is just a boatload of fun. And Trey White Goalie Academy. Maybe we're going to get something, similar with Coleman, right? He's going to have to learn something too.
Yeah. And I think it's, for Coleman, he's a big play guy. He's kind of a flashy player, and I think Josh Allen's that same way, right? So I think that they're going to want to make the flashy plays, and that's what's fun about
Oh yeah.
football. So I kind of like that about his personality as well. Is he's comfortable being flashy, right? If that
Mhm.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be fun. What about the other picks? Anything you want to point out about Cole
Yeah.
Bishup or
Yes.
um,
Because I think
Ray
my
Davis?
take on Cole Bishup is a little bit different than what I've heard from other people, but I'm not going to come off this, right? You picked a safety in the second round. That safety, we talked about this on our show. I mean, you can go back and listen to the safety episode. And what did I say? If you pick a safety, even in the top couple of rounds, that guy has to be a superstar. You're putting a lot of pressure on that guy to be an absolute superstar because we know that McDermott can turn an undrafted guy or a seventh round pick or a fifth round pick into a serviceable above average safety, right? And get it done. And now I think the pressure is on Bishop to maybe not in year one. We have the contingency plan of two veterans. That's why you're able to draft a rookie and bring him in and maybe get him some playing time, but also let him learn. But starting next year, you're not only the starter, you better be Jordan Poyer because you were drafted in the second round. We used all this capital on you. We could have got any other receiver we wanted at there.
Mhm.
We could have got any other position of upgrade ability in that spot. To go with safety doubles down that not only we know that McDermott could have done this with anybody, but this guy's talent is so good that he's going to
Yeah,
be the guy. And to counter that a little bit, the confidence is there from Bean and the rest of his staff, right? He said this was one of the
right.
only guys that they had absolute consensus on in the room on the entire draft board. They were absolutely consensus.
Right, and
This
there's
is the
been a
guy who's
lot of
going to
national
come
media.
for us.
Chris Sims is one of them that says he's going to start
That's crazy. Yeah,
right
he
right
could.
away
He could.
because,
I mean, we
and I
don't
think
have a lot.
it's because when you watch him, he does everything as a safety. He can blitz, he can cover, he can play strong safety, free safety. So you already have that hybrid thing we know the Bills like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Extremely coachable player.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
a typical Bills guy, right?
And
Like
he could
he's
play on
just
the
like
line too, right?
they mentioned he's just like Kincaid. He's just going to come to work and yes sir, no sir, and you're
All
not going to
right.
have to worry about him, right? So that it's hard to find that type of player who literally is designed for your system. It's a perfect match. For
Yeah.
what he does on the field translates
And
to Sean
I mean,
McDermott's defense, right?
Bean was trying to
So I think
trade
you go
up
for that,
for him. Bean was trying to trade up
right?
for him. He
Well,
said, he's
because
like,
you don't
I was
find
worried.
diamonds in the rough like that, right? Like this
Yeah. And
guy
when,
is our system, and he's a coachable player. I mean, obviously you're going to target him, and it's
yeah,
a kind of a discount. You got him for what, 4 years? I'm not sure what the salary is for a second rounder
very cheap.
pick six.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's locked
Like,
up. The cap's not completely cleaned up yet. So, um, yeah,
yeah,
I like the move just because you know he is such a good fit, and
sure.
it
Sure.
might
And I'm not saying
take
he's
a
going to
little
be a
bit, but
bust. And I'm not saying he's
yeah,
going to be a bust. I'm not saying that at all. I think he's a very talented guy. I think he makes a lot of sense for this Bills team. But taking him in the second round is where you're adding on to that pressure. There's a lot of pressure there. And again, everybody in the room seems to be confident. They're all on consensus with this. All the scouts love this guy. They ran in the pick, so they definitely knew that this was their guy left. I even said I thought maybe Bean was trying to trade up for an edge and not a safety, go up and get one of the guys who was left. And then one went a few picks ahead of us before we could trade up. So I think that ultimately is why they knew without a doubt. He said this was our last second round grade guy on the board. And that's who they got because, Bean had said before, there's only about half the round of second rounders that we have. And they ran that pick. That was the quickest submitted pick of the entire draft. I think when we were watching live, we're like, wow, pick's already in. That's crazy. So yeah, it's tough to go safety. I'm hopeful that he will succeed. I don't have any reason to believe not, but
when's
it
when's
puts
the
the pressure on.
embedded show come out? Do you know?
I don't know if they're going to release it as episodes, but usually it's this month after the
Yeah, that's
draft, and
always
so
interesting. I just
they
like seeing
usually do
like
like
little
one
insights
a
into the
week.
interviews and stuff
Oh
like that,
man,
right?
yeah. So the
It's
first
great.
episode was like an episode about Khalil Shakir, and that was phenomenal. I don't know if you watched that, but
I
some
did watch
some
that,
wide
yeah.
receiver insight. That was really really
Yeah,
cool.
and Terrell Bernard.
Loved it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
that was
yeah.
great. But yeah, it's because it seems like they were really excited about Cole Bishup. So it'd be interesting if we can get a clip from
Oh
the
yeah,
embedded to see like, okay, were they actually waiting? Because it sounds like they wanted to trade up. So, you know,
yeah.
they were really high on him. That's obvious. But it'd be cool to see inside the room. Who else do you want to talk about? Ray Davis is interesting.
Yeah.
Again, we had Zach Moss, another running
Mhm.
back here, late round running back. But what I like about Ray Davis, he's not going to try to go out of bounds. He's just going to hit the hole, and he's going to put a move on you or run through you. And it seems
Mhm.
like that every single play that's his
Yeah.
goal, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's probably what they like about him. But where do you see him fitting in? Because
Oh, yeah. What I think the highlight
he's
with him
RB3, I would say, right?
exactly. At the
Maybe four.
least, maybe 2 depending it depends on he has a very niche role, right? He's gonna be the bowling ball back, right, as I like to call them, right? He's gonna be the power back to go with the complement of what we already have in both the, James Cook and Ty Johnson, right? So, I like that aspect. We needed that. That's all I wanted in a running back. I didn't care which guy it was, honestly. But now that I saw the Ray Davis pick and I've learned more about him personally, he became like one of the players I felt like instantly I could relate to most. You know, he was homeless, all that. I wasn't ever homeless, don't get me wrong. But the fact that the adversity he's been through in his life and always having been at the back of the line, if you will, has made him humble, has made him appreciate everything he has. And what I said on another show was, I don't think there's anything that can happen to this dude on a football field that's going to fluster him, right? He's always going to be focused and be like, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do to get in my head or my heart because I'm going to go through you when I have the ball. And yeah, I think that that's a good, not only a good trait to have as a running back or a player, but just on the team in general. He is already at a level of maturity that a lot of guys never get to because they're told all the time, you're the best at this, you're the best at that, you're going to be in the NFL someday. In high school, they were the best, in college, they were the best. And here they are in the NFL, maybe reaching to be the best. But for him, it's going to be something that humbling presence, that I'm excited to see this player in action, not only for what he can do on the field, but again, another one where hearing him talk off the field and just be a leader in the clubhouse despite his position, as not the star running back or the star player is going to translate well and be a fun aspect.
Yeah. And I
And
didn't, I watched some
on
of his film. I didn't see any tush pushes.
yeah, right.
So that's really that's the role for RB3, right? Can you
Yeah,
do a little bit of special teams, a little bit of tush push,
he
maybe get
is
on the field a little bit,
the other
but
part that I think is a different aspect. Again, I've said this on the night of or before, but his pass catching ability, I think, moves the needle a lot for the Bills. The Bills have had some, I wouldn't call them bruisers, but guys to fill that role that are supposed to be the third down short yardage back, but they usually are not pass catching backs. And pass catching is a highlight for Ray Davis. So I think not missing a beat when you have either guy on the field is important because it makes the defense question, hey, they could still be throwing a pass to this guy, the running back, right? It doesn't mean we're going to bowling ball him up the middle every time. There's other creative things you can do, and that makes it fun as well.
yeah, running back's always a fun one to watch as well. So it'll be fun to, he'll probably play a lot in the free season. So that'd be fun to pay attention to as well. And you never know with running backs, right? It really doesn't matter where they're drafted anymore. It's like anybody can be good. I mean, I think the majority of good running backs come out of the second round anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you look back on the history of the draft. So, anybody's in play here. and the Bills like to fit them to a package too. So maybe there's a couple packages for Ray Davis. Maybe that's in the screen game, things like that. Something the Bills haven't really done a lot, screens, right? But we'll see if Joe Brady wants to throw the screen game in there. How about center? The Bills took another center, Cedric Van Pran Granger out of Georgia. Played a lot of games at Georgia, which says something, right? It's been the top program the last 3-4 years, and he's a captain on that team. I mean, there's a lot to like about him as well. I get mixed results from media members or reading some of the stuff online. Is he? A lot of people think he can start and he could be serviceable. A lot of people think he's maybe not athletic enough to do a lot of things. So really, I'm just curious, like, what's the Bills' strategy at center? You got Will Clapp,
Mm-hmm.
and you have Cedric Van Pran.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Well,
they're just kind of holding these guys in the roster and hoping that one of
correct.
them wins the job so you can move
Yeah, yeah.
McGovern back to left guard. But again, what happens if that doesn't happen? You're gonna just carry one? Is Will Clapp going to maybe fill in for guard or backup center, and then maybe Van Pran goes to practice squad, something like that? That's kind of where my brain goes. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely. I mean, we talked about it. We wanted them to add a guard slash center, and I think now with the addition of Van Granger, you got a guy who can start day one. Even now, I don't think that would be best case scenario. I don't want him to have to be the starter if that's not because he's a rookie. I'd like him to learn a little more in the NFL first, but he can, which is phenomenal. This was a guy who I saw this week people talking about him as one of the steals of this draft in the national media, not just from a Bills perspective, but like, hey, the Bills got this guy who's a starting center in the 5th round, and that's phenomenal for them, and this could really be a difference maker for them. So that aspect of it, I definitely like, and we know that Brandon Beane and McDermott like their versatile guys, right? So the depth that we've added this year, especially the veterans, they play multiple positions, so they are not only just oh, this is a center, that's a right tackle. It's no, he can play right tackle, he can play right guard. Oh, he can play center, he can play left guard. Oh, he can do this, right? So the versatility is important to Beane and McDermott when making out this roster. And Pran Granger basically only translates to a center, right? And I think that,
Mhm.
again, that tells you something about what they felt about the position. I fully expect him to be on the team, honestly. He's the depth at that position. And I think this gives Beane versatility to say, possibly trade away one of the veteran assets that we've already signed, if need be, to say, okay, now we've got, this guy's our 1, this guy's our 2, we've got this 3, we can trade him away for, a late round pick and have another 4th round pick or something going into next year. So there's some
Yeah.
wiggle room there that I really like. And that always with offensive line, we talked about it before the draft too. You draft offensive linemen just because you need bodies. You always need bodies on the offensive
Mhm.
line. And Beane did
Right.
that
You
with
always
2 of
take a
the last 3.
tackle. You always take a corner
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, but what's interesting is, for Cedric Van Pran, it's this is the best case scenario for him. You're coming to a team that needs who's
Mhm.
cuttable, right? I'm not sure how long they signed Will Clapp, but I mean, I feel like they would, you know, cut a free agent before they would cut a draft pick,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's advantage him, and it's the job's there for you. The team wants you to win and win the job, right? So what a great position for him. Being drafted in the 5th round, you actually have a real shot at starting. But we'll see how that plays out. And really, I can't tell you. I can't watch centers and gay. I don't. He's good or bad. I don't know. Um, so it'll be fun to pay attention to
Yes.
from other sources. But
Mhm.
like you said, though, he's not versatile. It's usually the Bills stick to the versatile guys only. Got to play 2 positions on the line to make the roster.
Mhm,
I've seen that
mhm.
over and over again.
Hey,
Um,
maybe they'll try him at guard, who
and
knows?
maybe he'll try him at guard. Yeah, I don't know. But you do like the personality stuff with being a captain at
Yes.
one of the better schools in the nation.
Beane even said it himself that was something I mean, he's kept saying the word dogs, right? Dogs and leadership qualities amongst these guys they drafted this year, right? We kind of brazed over Carter, who was the 3rd round pick,
Yeah,
but I mean, captain 2 years at Duke, so well-educated
yeah,
guy, 2-year captain, future Walter Payton Man of the Year winner, right? 100%. This guy's going to
yeah,
win it, whether it's with the Bills or somebody else, but he's going to be a Walter Payton Man of the Year winner. He's that kind of stand-up dude off of the field, and just leadership wise, even on the field, off the field. What a guy, right? So
right.
total McDermott Beane guy, right? So yeah, and same thing even here at the tail end of the draft in the 5th round, you get these guys that are, high character leadership guys. I think that maturity mattered, right? Maybe it's the moving on from Diggs thing or whatever, but they are just saying maturity is something that matters to us in this draft and who we want to be going forward. And they definitely got that in spades with the guys that they took, right? The leadership qualities, the on and off the field leadership, which is important when building
Yeah.
a team.
Oh, definitely. And I think Javon Sullivan, I got to watch him more, but like what I hear,
Yeah.
from Brandon Bean and company, but I have to dig into him. I haven't done that
To
yet,
me,
but
that was the smartest. To me, I said this, I think, yesterday as well. That the Solomon pick to me was a pick that the Bills circled on their board as no matter what, we are coming away with this guy. This is where we have him ranked, 5th, 6th round, whatever. But no matter what, we're getting this guy because he is a Von Miller mirror in a lot of ways, right?
He's got bend.
His
We heard
body
that.
type, yeah, his movement. You watch his highlights, it's definitely early Von Miller and college Von Miller. So I think that this was again part of the plan. They said, we have Von Miller for one more year. We need to bring in a guy who is going to benefit the most from being next to Von Miller every single day and learning from Von Miller every single day of this season. And that is who Solomon is. Body type, movement, everything to me was like, this is Von Miller. And that makes so much sense. That's maximizing the investment he made in Von Miller. Because they didn't bring Von Miller in here to be the number one leader in sacks in the world, right? We knew that he was an aging player, that he would be heading down toward his career.
Right. You're really hoping that he would help Rousseau,
Exactly. The young
Epinesa.
guys, and we're seeing that, right? We signed both of those guys. And I think bringing Solomon in was that one pick that you're like, this is the guy we need to have in here to learn under the wing of Von Miller before we end up having to make the decision next year to cut Von Miller, and that is, to me, that a valuable pick in and of itself. And the fact that dude's going to get playing time because we rotate everybody on the line, right? So he's going to play now. And to pick a guy in the 5th round who's going to get playing time is pretty good, right? He's not going to get a majority of the snaps by any means, right? Hopefully the guys we have stay healthy, and Von Miller and Epinesa and Rousseau, but he will be there, right? Right there with those guys. And yeah, that's another theme of this draft to me, was that being drafted 3 years from now, we could be looking and saying, how did a team draft all of these starters or all of these players who actually contribute on the roster currently? And that's basically what this draft could end up being. You could see a role. The role is clear for every single one of these picks, with exception of the last one, I would say, right? So yeah.
Well, let's talk about the last one a little bit. International player. And there's some benefits to that. Bean was explaining. It's like
free roster spot.
Free roster spot, and then if it goes to the practice squad, it's an extra practice squad spot too, right?
Yep.
So that's intriguing, but also imagine never playing in the football in your whole life and getting drafted to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Just wild, right? That's just a wild story.
So the benefit of drafting him is that nobody can scoop him from us. So even though he'll be on the practice squad, right? Normal NFL players, if they're on the practice squad, any team can pick them off and say, we want you on our active roster. And they could sign them to the active roster. With an international player, when they're on the practice squad, they're locked in. Nobody can steal them away from you if you drafted them, which we did. So that's why Bean chose to use
if they were unrestricted free agent, you signed after the draft,
then he could go anywhere.
Then they could go anywhere. And that's happened to the Bills before. I can't remember.
With an international guy, Christian Wade was on the team.
I can't remember if it was Wade. I know Wade was the popular one, but there's another international guy I think got picked up by another team. We'll get back on that. But anyway, this guy, Travis Clayton, 6'7", 300
huge
pounds, and he runs 4.7.
Yeah,
which is just insane. Like, big guys aren't supposed to be that fast.
Top of the
lots
charts.
Of lights there. I mean, do you need speed as a tackle in the NFL? Probably not, but I think it shows you the athleticism at that size, right? That's what they like. But I feel like if you don't know anything about football, it's hard to learn, right? There's so many nuances to the pro game, right? There's so many little tiny rules that it's extremely difficult to pick up on, right?
Yeah. Put your hands on the guy. But don't put your hands on the guy.
You're going against the best guys in the country who've played football their whole life, and they know all the moves, and they know how to get to you.
The counters. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. So it's going to be a hard road for any international player to come into a pro roster and make it and do well. Right. But I mean, the guy's definitely athletic enough, and it's going to take a lot of coaching.
But when you think about, to me, people were up in arms about that pick too. And I'm like, it's a 7th round pick. Normally you're thinking anybody 5th round and beyond, they'll be lucky to make the roster, right? You're getting cut, basically. So if you're on the practice squad, great. This was a free practice squad spot, and you get a super athletic guy for a full year to see what he gets for free. It didn't cost you anything except a 7th round pick, which if you took a normal guy was probably somebody you were getting cut anyway, right? So that's the benefit of this, and that's why it made sense, because it's no risk, and you get him for a year, and he's super athletic, so maybe something comes of it. And you have a freaking awesome offensive line coach, right, in Aaron Cromer, so that also incentivizes you that you think you can develop this kid. So I really like the idea of that. So hopefully something comes of it this time. and he actually makes the NFL field someday, either as a reserve or otherwise. I mean, even just as a reserve, that'd be amazing for both. But the expectation now is just learn, right? Learn, sit and learn.
Yeah, and I noticed the Bills are also outside the draft, loading up on linebackers, right? They did draft a guy. They signed Deion Jones. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes. Yep. Today.
Former Falcon. He was good with the Falcons too.
Yeah. For
You
2
know, he's a
years. Yeah.
lot of NFL experience. You know, they brought in the guy from Philly earlier in the season, earlier in the offseason.
Yes. Moreau.
Monroe, yeah, Moreau.
Nicholas Moreau. Yeah.
So what do you think that's about? Because obviously we thought they're still help me with the names again. The 3rd round pick from last, Dorian Williams.
Yep.
So they're stacked at linebacker right now. Do you think that has something to do with this new kickoff rule? They're going to put a lot of linebackers out there on special teams.
Maybe that's actually a point I had not considered, but I think it's just a matter of bodies. Linebacker was where we left the draft, looking at the roster. Linebacker, we would be cutting nobody, basically. So here on your roster. So that's very rare to go into training camp even without a guy even on the bubble to be cut, because you usually carry 6 linebackers. You only had 5 that were going to make it, basically. So now you have some bodies, some wiggle room. You know, there is the aspect of special teams that matters with a guy, especially like Moreau, in my mind. So you add another body here that can contribute, that is a veteran. And, well, if he makes the roster, we'll be at the bottom of the depth chart. Okay, that's great. We want to have a guy who we're not bringing off the street, literally out of his camper, like we did this going into the playoffs this year. But it's just an addition. He could get cut, and it wouldn't surprise anybody. It's like, okay, that's great. We have our guys. We're confident in who we have. Hopefully our 2 starters are going to come back strong and healthy, and the rest of them will barely ever see the field except on special teams.
Right.
But
Well, I do feel like with the new kickoff rule, it's like you're going to see more safeties, more linebacker types, because you got to be more physical. You don't have a lot of time to get around guys anymore, right? You got to kind of go through them, right? So that's really going to change a lot of
and I did say, McDermott is on the competition committee who made the decision to switch to this mode of kicking. So he has a little bit of an advantage, I think. He knows more about this than everybody else, in the sense that it was presented, they discussed it, they made that decision together. So he is prepared for it probably a little more than just the general NFL. And kind of has a plan for it, knows how to plan for it. Same with the 6th round pick here of Hardy, right? I think that is definitely a key aspect of his game. We had no punt returner designation on the roster, but you draft this guy. No. Exactly, maybe. But now you draft this guy, and he immediately has a future role as, backup nickel corner and immediate impact from a 6th rounder. You're getting immediate impact from a 6th rounder every single game with this new kickoff rule. That is absolutely phenomenal to think about, again, as a guy who has upside as his position of cornerback, but just immediate impact. He's going to be out there on day 1. He's going to be listed as starting punt returner for this team, or a kick returner for this team. So he's likely to be the first guy to touch the ball for the Buffalo Bills, which is crazy, right? The 6th round pick. So that is,
can you trust him? That's the big question.
When you put it into perspective,
I think he said there's no muffs.
That's why they picked him. No muffs. Yeah, like he's very sure-handed, and he had averaged like 14 yards of return or something. So that to me screams like, you're going to be the guy, and that's why we picked you, and you have an immediate role in 6th round.
Yeah.
So
who else could you consider for returner on this team as it is right now?
Oh my gosh,
it's pretty thin. I mean, we know Micah Hyde would used to catch a couple punts here and there, but
that's the argument too. Is you're going to need 2 guys because they could kick away from one of them, and then. So I mean, you could put Samuel back there, right? And he's another guy where he's fast, he's jukey. You kind of want that.
Shakir ever do returns? I think maybe hit a roll.
I don't know if Shakir has ever done it. But I don't think they would now though, because he's got more value on. But to me, I think Samuel would be the first choice for me, because he is more of that. He's got the speed and he's jerky in terms of his motions to be able to, do what it takes for a punt return.
John says Isabella, good point. Yeah, he did have a couple, but does he make the roster? I mean, it's
right now maybe
kind of that guy you bring down, you bring up, you bring down.
And Hamler, right, who they added, that's a good point. If he can stay healthy for more than a snap ever in a season,
Yeah.
So
Hamler to me is a long shot. I know, love the guy coming into the league, but just go back and like looking at his history in the NFL.
it's
It's
bad.
been bad every year. It's whether
Injuries,
it's injury, whether it's he just got cut for no reason. It just seems like a long shot for him. I feel like when he was healthy, and I can't remember the team off the top of my head, but they ended up cutting him when he was healthy, which tells you he's behind in development. Just not going to work out, I don't
The
think.
Broncos had him, and then he went to Indy on the practice
Yeah.
squad, I believe. So yeah. So I mean,
Yeah, he's got a number
just
of injuries
health
too. It's
health
just
is a big
hard.
concern there. I don't think I could trust him for that, right? I would
Yeah, he's a long
probably
shot for me, but
put
I'd
Sam.
love to see him, revitalize his career in Buffalo, because if he can get back to the player he was in college, I think there's a lot there, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know the extent of his injuries, and obviously you would know more about the science and the medical side than I would. But yeah, long shot for Hamler, but his name always is popping up. All right, what else?
What did we not cover? I think we talked about every single pick now, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Well, it's funny because I had a baby, so we've been busy all day. And I told Anthony before, I was like, if we just have to do a 45-minute show, that's fine. We'll just hit on the key points. But obviously, we've done so much work pre-draft, we can talk pretty much all night about football. But
yeah, I think the other big takeaway for me, right? Consistency across the board, that these guys are going to contribute now. It's absolutely insane, right? If we look back 3 years a draft 3 years ago, and you said, well, yeah, their first round guy is a starter. Maybe he wasn't as much of a star as they thought. And second and third rounders are on the team. They're contributing good. So that was a good move. Maybe one other guy in the draft, and you're happy. This draft has the insane capability of nothing I've ever seen before, of being immediate contributors right away, meaning everybody on who they drafted, with exception of the last one who's a practice squad only player, everybody could be on the roster opening day. Everybody could have a contributing role, with exception of maybe the backup tackle. We don't want him to be playing, but have a meaningful role on this team, from kick return in the 6th round all the way up to Keon Coleman as the wide receiver 1, if you will, in that position in the 2nd round. That is unbelievable. And then moving forward, even if it's not this year, 3 years from now, multiple guys could be starters and everybody could still be on the roster. That is insane.
so funny.
Normally after a draft, you and I are saying, well, this 5th round guy they just drafted
Right.
isn't even going to make the team, right? He's going to get cut, and maybe he'll be on the practice squad. These guys are on the roster and contributing day one, which is phenomenal.
I don't know. We say that every year, I think, but let's go back. So I have the
5th, 6th, 7th
2021
round guys. I don't think I've ever said that about a 5th, 6th, 7th round guy. It's
Well,
like,
I mean,
okay, who's
let's
that?
go
He's
back
never going to
3
make the
years,
roster.
though. Let's go back I have the 2021 draft results up for the Bills. Greg Rousseau, still on the roster. Boogie Basham, gone. Spencer Brown, good pick,
Yep.
still on the roster. Tommy Doyle, not sure what actually happened to him.
Injury.
He's not on the roster.
He's injured.
Gone. Marquise Stevenson, 6th round. Gone. Right, didn't work out. Damar Hamlin on the roster. Richard Wildgoose.
Nope.
Or Chad Wildgoose. And Jack Anderson. Gone. So it's just
those weren't guys like, even the Wild Goose pick, maybe depth. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a good depth player. Good
like,
for a 6th round.
Team.
He's going to sit on the bench and maybe play. And
2022, Kyrie Elam doesn't play. And anyway,
well,
side note:
TBD.
James Cook, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir. See, this is a good draft, right? Matt Ariza, Christian Benford, Luke Tenuta. I think he's off the roster. Then Balin Spector, still on the roster. So just 2 years ago, you have players still on the roster contributing.
Correct.
3 years ago, not a lot,
so
right?
much. But that's the average. Again, most of the time, it's great when you get a start. McDermott and Bean have been phenomenal at taking a undrafted or 5th round or 6th round guy and making them a starter, and us being like, wow, where did this guy come from? But to me, that's the outliers, right? You can't rely on that. But to get consistency across the board of contributors on your team, like that's a absolute A+ draft.
Tommy Doyle still on the roster.
He's a reserve. He's injured. He got injured last preseason. He wasn't on the team at all. Well, he was on the team, but injured reserve. So now the question is, what is he going to be coming into this draft? Bills did take a tackle in the 6th round. but hopefully Tommy Doyle's at a point where we can actually see him. So yeah,
Well, I'm not sure if I want to see him. Our tackles are pretty good.
depth wise, yeah, and they're in
Depth,
love
yeah,
with the
yeah. I'd
guys.
like to see
They
him,
were in
getting water or something.
they were in love with some of these young guys that were on the team last year. So yeah,
Yeah. So it really like overall, I think McDermott and Bean have been great at drafting. Because you just go back to like before they were with the Bills,
yes,
it was just horrendous all the time, right? But they've really been able to their credit, develop players into good starters in the league,
yep,
over and over again, and especially on defense. Taron Johnson, Matt Milano. I mean, the list is endless. We talk about it all the time, but it really is impressive. Like Christian Benford, the player he's become now.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not sure. I have to go around and look at other teams and see if it doesn't feel like the norm to me, right? I feel like the Bills are especially good at it, especially
Yes,
at secondary, right? But yeah, we have to look around the league a little bit and see like kind of
yes. There's no
what
doubt
teams
they
are good
don't
at
get enough
developing,
love
which
for
ones
that.
aren't. Yeah,
They don't get enough love for that because they drafted Cody Ford. Like, come on, it's
yeah.
not.
Everyone
It's
misses at
one
times,
guy.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Anyway, that sounds like a big homework project, honestly.
There you go. Well,
Yeah,
we'll get deep into it before training
tracking
camp.
every
It'll
draft
give us
pick.
something to do. Yeah.
All right, so what's our next show? We got what rookie minicamp camp coming up. That should be fun.
Next week is schedule release, Eric. You and I get to
Schedule
talk
release.
about it
Yep,
first.
yep.
We're gonna
That's
be
fun.
That's
Yep.
next Thursday, so we will get
And
to discuss it before anybody, which is
I think I
awesome.
saw a tweet that the Bills are going to be a lot of primetime games again, a lot of nighttime
Oh
games.
yeah, definitely.
So
How could you not be? Good
let's see,
matchups this
Bills.
year. Good matchups. The one I have circled honestly is the Detroit game. That's the one I want. I've never been to a game in Detroit, so I want to go to that game, and hopefully it schedule wise works out that I can.
And I think Kansas City comes to Buffalo, so that's a
Yep.
good change, right? A regular season game. That's a highlight. I mean, away game at Houston should be fun with the dig
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be prime time too. Absolutely.
Yeah, the
Now,
home schedule
oh
looks
god,
relatively light. San Francisco coming to Buffalo. I like that. That feels a lot better than the Bills going to San Francisco.
correct. Yeah, yeah. Making that
They beat
long
them
trip.
before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bills have
Mm-hmm.
beat them before. Jaguars, Titans, Cardinals, 49ers, Chiefs, and then the division. That's your home opponents. Away opponents, uh, Texans, Colts, Rams, Seahawks. Obviously, the division, the Ravens, which sounds tough, and then the Lions, like you said.
Yeah. So it's going to be fun, and next week we'll see it all get released. Just remember, people, don't believe anything until it becomes official with the schedule release. Just like before the draft, don't believe anything during draft week ever. It's don't believe anything leading up to the schedule release until it's official, because so many people get hyped. Oh, the Bills are going to open at home against this team, and now, yeah, and then the schedule comes out, and it's like, no, some jerk just decided to make that a thing, and then tricked one reporter into saying it, and now everybody thinks it's real, but it's not until it's official. So only believe what becomes official. We're going to break it all down for you here because that'll be fun. We'll be reacting just along with the rest of you in terms of what our favorite things are, and maybe least favorite, or when the Bills bye week is, and those kinds of things matter. So next week should be a really, really fun episode because it's happening that day. So we'll be live to give you all the reaction, and you guys can react with us and tell us what you think.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun, because like week one, I mean, you know how it went last year. Really just looking forward to that week one game because it was a disaster last year at the Jets, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Zach Wilson, Rodgers goes down, Zach Wilson comes in, still wins for the Bills.
Mm.
And it was just it was kind of bumpy since then, it felt like. But yeah, hopefully the Bills learn their lesson. Let's not win all our games late in the year. Let's spread it out a little bit, right? So we'll see what the schedule looks like and see if that looks favorable or not. All right, that's all we got. So see you next week. And thanks for tuning in with us. We always appreciate it. Make sure you hit the like button and check out some other shows on Built in Buffalo. A lot of good talent out there. A lot of fun opinions this time of year,
Mm-hmm.
especially talking about the draft picks and everything. It's hope season, right? So be sure to check that out. And we'll be on next Thursday at 7:30 Eastern, same time.
Absolutely. Thank you again for all that. This week has been phenomenal. It's great to be back with you, Eric, and doing our regular thing. We'll be back next week, and thanks for kicking it with us.
Later.